Hi, this is Steve Nanos of SCA-TV, and I will be interviewing Larry Orlov and Arthur Schutze of the Anthem Council. Thank you for coming today. Can you tell us about the Anthem Council? When was it established, and who are the members?
Well, the Anthem Community Council was established, and I think it's important to lay a little foundation here. Anthem is a master plan community, the greater Anthem community. And it's made up of 6 homeowners associations, 6 entities. Anthem Country Club, Solera, Anthem Highlands, Sun City Anthem, Terabella, and Coventry, okay? And so when the master plan was put together, Del Webb also created an organization, which is the Anthem Community Council, which was responsible for the common areas of the greater Anthem community.
What are the services provided by the Anthem Council, and where is the funding coming from?
The funding for Anthem Community Council comes strictly from the communities. And it's established that way to fund the general services that Anthem Community Council is responsible for.
What are the dues owed by each homeowner for 2022?
Well, it's a general question because the duty, the charges that are charged to the individual homeowner associations is not a different number for each one. It's across the board the same amount of money, the same charge per door per community. So that's the way we've established our budget and where our income comes in from. And we basically send that out quarterly. It's paid quarterly by each of the homeowner associations.
So the charges are per resident, but they're collected through the HOAs because it would be an administrative nightmare for us to collect from 13,000 homes. So we collect through the HOA. We never think about it in terms of what percentage each community pays. We think about it in terms of every resident pays the same.
Yes. When you say resident, is that each door, not the number of people?
It's a home, a door. We
Right.
use it as doors.
Yeah.
How is each community represented on the council?
Well, the way the bylaws are constructed, each of the 6 HOAs are allowed to have 1 director on the Anthem Community Council. So that represents 6. Then there's an additional director, which is an at-large director, so that we have a total of 7. So example, Art is the director from Sun City Anthem.
Do the directors need to be part of the community?
The answer to that question is they must be in the Anthem community. They have to be a resident of the Anthem community. Now, each of the individual 6 HOAs have different bylaws. Okay, so it doesn't mean, in the past, there's been many that have been served because they were a director or an officer of that HOA. But a number of the communities allow anyone to be a director. And a matter of fact, we encourage, Anthem Community Council just recently, we encourage a more open look at directorship. Because when an individual comes to the board, and let's say they were president of Sun City Anthem as an example, well, the responsibilities for that role and then our responsibilities is overwhelming. And therefore, you know, we've encouraged those that have bylaws, or those communities that have a bylaw that said they must be a director of the board. We're suggesting that they may consider amending that so that we can have a responsible, knowledgeable individual to, if they're interested, to be assigned and be given that directorship by that homeowners association.
So I was originally appointed while I was a member of the SCA board, but then when I left the SCA board, the board asked me to continue as a council director. So I've been elected by the SCA board, and that's why I'm there, even though I'm not an SCA director anymore.
Is the council solely made up of the board of directors, or do you have other staff and members?
No, we don't have any other staff. The only thing that we do is we have First Service Residential, which helps to manage our association, our council. And they do a lot of they do our financials. We have a manager who manages and keeps us responsible, and that's the only one that we have as far as a management is concerned.
Are the member communities equally represented? In other words, is it one representative per community, or is it by the number of homes in each community?
Okay, the answer is no. There is no equalization. It's one director is nominated from each of the 6 communities. The only other issue is the at-large, which can come from any of the communities.
Since the council's inception in 1998, what are some of the major accomplishments of the council over the years?
That's a challenging question and an interesting question. And I'll give you my opinion. Art may have a different opinion. I would say in the first 15, maybe 20 years at the most, that it was pretty much rubber stamped. There wasn't much being accomplished in that sense. And let me go back to what Del Webb actually put into the document in our bylaws. Their concept, which was a cut and paste from previous developments that they had done, indicate in the bylaws that the Anthem Community Council was there to bring these communities together, social activities, all kinds of interesting things. Now, in reality, that doesn't happen. Anthem, Sun City Anthem does not operate like Anthem Country Club or Anthem Highlands. We are individual 6 communities with a different constituency in each of those communities. So even though it says it in our bylaws, over those 8, 15, 20 years, it never happened. Okay. So from that standpoint, there really is nothing other than we all live in the greater Anthem community. Unless you want to add something to that.
Well, in terms of accomplishments, as Larry said, previous boards basically were there to maintain the landscaping and the water features and the street lights and a few of the other things that the council takes care of. But they only maintained it, and it aged. And so now we're in a whole different environment because we have to do renovation. 20-year-old plants and 20-year-old irrigation doesn't work. Too many problems. So we're renovating the whole area. So the major accomplishments are yet to come.
Yeah, and I would like to follow up on what Art said is that this board has been very active to realize and we determine these issues. And unfortunately, they weren't planned for. So our the previous boards didn't plan for the future. This board has taken a different approach. We want to plan for 10, 15, 20 years out. We want to turn over to those that follow us with a roadmap. And we've established that roadmap so that they can follow it and continue on that to be able to ensure that the viability and the look and feel of the greater Anthem community is what people, why they moved here, why they bought here, and what their expectations are.
So I would assume that the looking to the future part, which wasn't covered before, would be involving an estimate of capital expenditures going forward, a reserve fund. If you could just clarify that.
Yeah, I'll let the reserve fund, I'll leave that to Art, who is our treasurer. One thing I will tell you that in the original establishment of Anthem Community Council, a reserve fund wasn't even created. It wasn't until probably less than 10 years, somewhere between 5 and 10 years, the president at the time decided, why don't we have a reserve fund? So a reserve has only been in place a short period of time, okay? And we have been funding it, but not at the level that we're going to be funding it now. I'll leave that to Art. But so as far as, where that funding comes from, as I said, it comes from the councils, and we are now establishing a more significant reserve fund to be able to support what we have now established as a 10-year plan.
So at the moment, we have about $1.2 million in the reserve fund, but we did a dues increase last year from $89 per house per year to $129 per house per year, which is a significant percentage, although most people would view it, I think, as a small number. And that extra contribution goes almost entirely into the reserve fund, so that we're now putting $750,000 a year into the reserve fund to support this renovation project. We don't have to do a reserve study because we're not an HOA. We're not subject to the rules of NRS 116 as the HOAs are, but we do many things the same way just because it's good business and people are familiar with it. So we do have a new reserve study in progress, and we'll see what that tells us about where we are and whether that $750,000 a year is a reasonable number or not. You know.
As a follow-up to what Art said, is that we're not under NRS 116, which governs HOAs. So when Anthem Community Council was created, it was created as a non-profit corporation. Just to be clear, there's a separation between council, or how we're regulated, and how we operate versus the 6 HOAs.
We've all heard about the water issues that we're facing, and that there is a large water conservation regulation that affects businesses, HOAs, multi-family communities as well. How does that affect us? Are there other major projects associated with that we are facing and will be spending funds for?
Yeah, I could start off with that. And one of the things that it's a privilege to have Art on our board as not only the treasurer, but we've engaged him more because of his background and being able to be like the, quote, landscaping director. He gave himself that title, and I agreed with it. It's a good one. We realized that there was a major issue. And it goes back to my comments about what could have been done in the past to help alleviate the significant issues we have today. The system itself, not just on our responsibility, but is 20 years old, and the majority of all those poly in the ground and so forth are only warranted for 10, 12 years. That's a significant expense because when you think about it, there's thousands of miles of irrigation on the greater Anthem community. And now that has to be replaced. Now, why does it have to be replaced? We have leaks, we have certain valves, et cetera, that will fail, and they need to be replaced. And that's also what's going on in the renovations, which Art can articulate too, that we're doing that as we go along. So we're replacing all of that now. And it's a long-term, very long-term responsibility. Maybe you can add on to that.
Well, we think the whole renovation is on the order of 10 years for replacing any plants that are dead or dying, for thinning out some of the plants that are healthy enough to remain, but it's overpopulated in plants. But the turf removal aspects of it has to have the priority because it has to be done sooner by legal mandate, and it's good, sensible business for us anyway because the turf is the principal user of the water and is also frankly very, creates a lot of difficulties because whenever you try to water turf, there's always a possibility of getting water in the street, and as soon as you get water in the street, you get a fine from the city of Henderson, and nobody wants to have that.
They do give us a warning, though.
Yes. So we put a priority on that, and we got an early start, I think, compared to a lot of people, and we should be in good shape to have all the turf removed by the legal mandate, date without any trouble. Frankly, the pacing item at the moment, we've been through all of the procedural steps necessary. The pacing item at the moment is just that the landscapers, including our preferred contractor, Par 3, are simply overwhelmed by organizations in the valley, especially HOAs, begging them to come tear turf out. I mean, this is a great time to be a landscape company because the opportunities are almost unlimited.
And we all sat down, but Art did a lot of the number crunching to come up with a an idea, a concept, a rough order of magnitude, if you will. And a lot of it had to deal with the information that we had. So when we put it together, we originally came up with a shorter number than 15 million. But after conversations with some of the homeowner boards, we realized, and they agreed, that maybe it should be a little higher than that just to make sure. And that may include a little inflation, but maybe not enough inflation. We're just not sure yet because there's a rough order of magnitudes. But I think Art could probably articulate more, but that just gives you how we came up with where we did. So we put a lot of thought into it before we went and discussed it with the homeowner associations.
So the 15 million rough estimate is for the entire landscape renovation. We haven't separated out the turf portion of it because we don't work that way. We try to do a section at a time. For example, the south bank of SCA Drive from Williamsport to Langston Hughes, and we're doing everything in there. The irrigated sections, the trimming of the natural sections, the replacement of the turf. So we don't separate that out in our budget thinking. But the 15 million, the good news is that we're underrunning it so far per square foot by working carefully with our landscaper and using a careful selection of plants and the right amount of plants. The bad news is no one knows where inflation's going, and it's a long-term project.
Are there any other state, local, or federal incentives that apply to the work that we'll be doing?
Well, the way the current system works is the first thing you have to do is have Southern Nevada Water Authority, once we give them the areas that we're interested in, they have to be measured. And the reason they measure them is because once we do the renovation, they will come back out and ensure that we did what we said we were going to do. And currently, and certainly subject to change, there's a $3 per 10,000 at the first 10,000 square feet and $1.50 after that. And then in addition, over the last year and a half, the city of Henderson has pumped in a little money, which was a surprise when we took it. But the speculation is that the current $3 per square foot on the 10,000 is probably going to diminish, and they're probably going to have it all at $1.50. That's speculation right at the moment, because as Art has indicated, everybody is now going after some of that money. And we're on the deadline on non-functional grass of 2027 to have that completed by. Okay, so otherwise there could be fines after that, but you may want to advance on that.
Well, the first point would be to assure all the residents we apply for every rebate that we can find. We're looking for it. So they will be whatever they will be, but we will do our best to find every rebate. All our turf areas have been measured. They're all part of our current application with SNWA. So as we do them, we turn them in. We are exploring any further rebate from the city of Henderson that might be available. We got one check for $16,000 from them, which we appreciated, but we don't have any faith that there's more there. And there are lots of rumors that SNWA is going to stop doing this altogether because there's no point spending taxpayer money to incentivize behavior that's required by law in terms of removing the turf. The other general point I would make is simply that all of the financial planning that I do and the calculations, the spreadsheets, and so on, all assumes that there are no rebates because I can't count on them. So they're all a bonus when they come in, but they're not going to cover the majority of the expenses.
Where's the water coming from that's used by the council for irrigation?
We get this water from where everybody else gets it from.
Yeah.
There's nothing unusual about it. It's
Clarify.
Well, we buy it from the city of Henderson,
Yeah.
and we pay. We have 29 water meters, and we pay 29 water bills to the city of Henderson every month. And they get the water from SNWA, so we get it the same place as Larry says everybody else does. And we look forward to, with these turf removals and the changing of the types of plants that we have, to having significant reductions in consumption and our water bill as time goes on.
Right.
Nice. Is that water potable water? Is it gray water for landscape?
It is not gray water.
it is not.
It's we get those. It's City of Henderson tap water. The gray water system was never plumbed through the landscaping.
Are sidewalks part of the council's responsibility and projects?
Well, that's an interesting story. It was about 5 years ago, we were approached by the City of Henderson to say they got a grant of $6 million from the federal government. And they would want to use that money to add additional sidewalks in the Anthem community. And a lot of this was generated by some Sun City residents that were more concerned that they had to cross over if they were out walking the dog or walking, for exercise. So they were complaining to the city. So they thought that this $6 million federal grant would help to do that. So we had discussions over the last 4 years about this. And surprisingly, because it required some easements and a whole lot of things to make that happen. But the city decided to move forward with that project. Personally, while I thought it wasn't a bad idea, but in the beginning, but I think that we've done a better job because we didn't, at the time, 4 years ago, we only had like 1 or 2 crossing lights that you've seen in the streets. We've now added more, so we have 14 now. And, so that when people do cross, they could cross at that particular area where there was sidewalk. But the city has decided to move forward on the project you see today, where we are adding those additional sidewalks. They won't be fully rounded, but where the easement's been allowed to put them in.
So the city builds the sidewalks after they're built. It's our job to maintain them. And the landscaping, and I will say that we were not pleased to find out at the last moment when they started building the sidewalks that the city's plan was to have the contractor reinstall 25-year-old irrigation after the sidewalks were laid. So Anthem Council, with some help from SCA, is now supplying new new irrigation valves to the city's contractor so he doesn't reinstall 25-year-old valves. So because we're going to have to maintain it when they're done, we were trying to make sure there's some quality to the work now.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, we originally were going to do that ourselves. And when the sidewalk project came on, as Art indicated, and they were going to replace what was already there, and because we attend, and Art has attended, I've attended, every 2 weeks there's a meeting about this project that the City of Henderson runs. And we found out about that. We just said, no, that's not acceptable at all. So.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have a selected contractor? You had mentioned that was ongoing with a partner. And what was the bidding process that was used?
Well, Par 3 is our current partner. They were, and the way I look at things is eventually we had an RFP that we put out about 2 years ago. Because we were not pleased with the current contractor. We found a lot of discrepancies from that previous contractor and their representations and the actual results that we saw. And at that time, and I would have to compliment Art, we decided to put a volunteer committee together to basically look at our property and give us some input, which they did. They did a great job. And based on that, we decided it was time to look to go out to RFP, which is what we did. And we had 4 vendors that we isolated it down to that presented to us. And at the end of the day, we chose Par 3 Landscaping is who our current vendor, who is now a partner of ours, yes. And the beauty of Par 3 is they are local. They're one of the largest, if not the largest, local landscaping provider. They do a lot of high-end properties in the valley, from the ridges in Summerlin to some of the significant ones in Summerlin, Seven Hills, etc. And we've created a partnership with them, which we're very pleased with and executing on our plans. But that's the way we operate, and then we chose the one that we chose, and we've moved forward from there.
So as we do each section of the renovation, our current process then is to give a request for a proposal to Par 3, sole source, so that we have the same company doing the design, the installation, and then the maintenance, because we have a maintenance contract with them. And we find that works because they accept full accountability. If a plant dies, we don't have an argument about whether it was the wrong plant or it was put in wrong or it was maintained wrong. It's their fault and they fix it. So it's worked well. Some people express concern about having sole source contracting, but I want to emphasize that we haven't contracted for the whole $15 million renovation. It's one section at a time. If we're ever dissatisfied with Par 3, we'll simply start bidding other people into it. You know, we're not obligated to use them forever, but so far it's been great.
Yeah, and I want to go back on that one because, I mean, where I come from, okay, and my background, you know, and as I work with some major companies, and what I have found is creating a partnership is more important than being a vendor. And when you're a partner, then you're responsible to each other, and you communicate, and you're honest with each other, and it's worked great. And the last thing I wanted to hear when I was in business and working with these companies, that they wanted to go to RFP. I didn't want that. And I'm happy to say it didn't happen.
Right.
And that's why I think I've had to convince a couple of people on the board that this is a different attitude. This is not an HOA. We don't have to go out and follow those rules. So let's follow the rules, and when you create partnership, you get more bang for your buck.
Do you know of any discussions considering the severe water shortages for the grass restrictions to be extended beyond communities and businesses to the actual private residences, homes in the area?
Well, we recently had some discussions with SNWA about any coming regulations, and I will say that this is not an official SNWA spokesperson here, just me, but we were particularly interested in whether they would be closing down water features, because in addition to the landscaping, that water feature you see on the parkway as you start up there is part of our responsibility. The answer was no. They don't plan to regulate the water features. Their consumption is actually not that high. They are, of course, recirculated water with some added to compensate for evaporation. They did talk about some potential regulations on the size of swimming pools, on requirements for swimming pool covers. They didn't say anything about individual residents. But of course they encourage all individuals to get the grass out of their yard. Again, I'm not an official spokesman for SNWA, but that's what they told us recently.
The 2022 budget is approximately $550,000 more than 2021's. Previous years only had very small increases. What portion of that increase is due to the water conservation landscaping project that we've been discussing?
Well, I think I'll turn that over to the treasurer. He's probably got the best answer, and we're getting ready to go into budget sessions now, because one of the things we have to do is we have to budget early for next year or for the years ahead, because once our budget's in place, we obviously give that information to the various HOAs so that they can have that element, you know, placed into their budget. So I think Art can answer that question.
Well, you know, the budget, the dues were $89 per lot per year. We raised them to $129, which I think I mentioned. And almost all of that went into the reserve fund. So the reserve fund now is collecting $750,000 a year. So it's almost all about renovation. Now, we are finding that with all of the level of activity that we have going on with you know, we're doing a lot more tree trimming, we're doing removal of dead trees, so there's a lot more going on than turf removal. We're going to need some more management time from FSR, certainly. So We didn't increase that yet. We probably will have to in the future, but last year's increase was all about putting enough money into the reserve fund to support this landscape renovation project.
Are there any other future projects that you see coming down the road in the next few 5 to 10 years?
The turf removal is only the first high priority part of renovating. All those other irrigated areas also need to have dead plants removed. Other healthy plants have to be thinned out, and all that irrigation has to be changed. So that'll be going on for quite some time. And in the long run, one can certainly hope maintenance requirements will be down even after we get the turf out. At least we can stop mowing this stupid stuff, which is a real maintenance headache. So in the long run, maintenance would go down, water consumption will go down. So certainly there's hope that in the long run, but it'll be years. But in the long run, perhaps in real terms at least, I don't know where inflation will be, but in real terms, maybe the dues can come back down. But it's going to be the long term.
As a follow-up to Art, I mean, we have approximately, 40 monument sign areas around the whole loop, indicating what, the villages, et cetera, et cetera. And, those little areas, the way they were built, you'll notice there's a lot of grass on those areas. Our plan is to remove all of that grass. It's very costly, and Art made the point. If the landscaper has to take a truck, take out a mower, get over, take 2 minutes to set it up, 2 minutes to cut it, and go through that process. So there's a labor issue, there's a water issue. We're going to eliminate all that because you're going to see those monument areas change to be more desert-oriented. Therefore, it'll save us on water, save us on labor, and there's really no maintenance over there. So that's a critical one that we want to do and would help. But I think, as is pointed out, there'll be offsets. In other words, we may see some reduction in water usage, and less maintenance. So those things are all valuable. Those have to be evaluated on an annual basis to see how we would then budget for that along the way.
So we develop our budget in July. We look into the crystal ball as best we can. It's usually pretty foggy 6 months before the year starts, but that's when we have to do it, because the HOAs all need to work hard on their budget in August. So we need to tell them what our needs are going to be. And we could just tell them how much money they needed to collect, but we don't work that way. We will go see each board again, as we did last year, and discuss with them what our needs are and get their suggestions and so forth. So it's very much a collaborative effort between the 7 entities, the council and the 6 HOAs.
I have to add to that because prior to the new board coming in, and Art and myself, there were no meetings with the HOAs. They just, here's the deal, pay the fee. And I said, considering what we have to do, and the board agreed, we've got to go tell them what we're doing. And I think the response, and I think you would agree, Art, was really very positive about what we're trying to do. And I can't look backwards. We have to draw the line in the sand, and we're moving forward. So we got a lot of a good, solid support for this activity and this action.
Good, thank you. You mentioned some other capital work that has to have been done, or replacements such as streetlights.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been completed? Is that ongoing? I would assume you have an ongoing reserve portion for
We do. For the streetlights are a funny story. Yeah. Many people may not even notice, but the streetlights within the council areas are unique design streetlights. Here and there, there's a city street light mixed in at an intersection, but those unique ones were selected by Del Webb, and their agreement with the city, which the council has inherited, was that the city would tolerate these unique street lights as long as any needed replacements were paid for by the council. So the only reason a replacement would be required is an automobile accident. And thank goodness we haven't had one lately. But over the years, there have been where people drive through and knock over the. We have regular automobile accidents where people drive through the plants, but we haven't had anybody hit a streetlight lately. But if a streetlight's knocked down, the council furnishes it to the city, and the city has their crew put it up. So we have to maintain an inventory, which the city is kind enough to store for us. The only other really major item, we have some benches and things and sidewalks to take care of, but the other major issue on the horizon is the water feature. The water feature, has a lot of heavy-duty pumps and hardware inside it, and we have to, plan to renovate those as the time goes on, to update them as time goes on.
I'll add one more thing to Art's presentation regarding the streetlights, which is a fascinating one, because then you might want to ask a question about the medians, which is another interesting question. But when there's an accident and a pole goes down, his representation is correct. However, we get a police report, we file, and we have the driver of the car. Basically we go to them, and their insurance company will pay us for the replacement of those levels, as they will for trees or anything else in the medians or wherever they hit.
If the police find the driver, absolutely.
So I don't want you to think we just forget about it and let the guy go scot-free. No, we don't do that.
Right.
We go after him. Yes, we do.
Back in 1998 or whenever they were all LEDs were not available. Is there an energy efficiency project coming for those where they might be changed or have been changed?
We don't do that. The city takes care of the light bulbs. We only have to put up the street light, and the city's doing whatever the city does, and we're not in control of it. They're changing light bulbs and putting in LEDs where they can. We have the landscape accent lighting along the parkway. That belongs to the council, and the lights and the monument signs belong to the council. And we have changed as many of those to LEDs as possible, and are considering renovating the whole electrical system to a lower voltage. It's currently household 110 volt. Whether we'll do that or not, I don't know. There are some of these areas where it's, a wide variety of opinions among the residents about, how important it is to have that landscape lighting. Is it worth renovating? Do we care? Do we need more? Do we need less? They aren't simple questions, but that's one of the reasons we go see the HOA boards, is to get their inputs on those questions.
I will give you some additional input on, and I just found this out about 8-9 months ago. We always uncover something new all the time, even though when you think you know a lot, we don't. The landscaping and lighting, many residents, including myself, and I think we didn't realize it only exists in one area, and that's going down Anthem Parkway, and it stops at Tony Curtis. Other than that, you won't see any landscaping lighting anywhere. So why is that? Found the answer to that question. It turns out that one of the early boards thought, wouldn't it be nice to have landscape lighting? So they went into this plan to put in the lighting, which is on Anthem Parkway. And when it got to Tony Curtis, they realized how expensive this was getting and said, this is not a good idea any longer. And hence, that's why there is no other lighting anywhere else on the loop. So now, to Art's point, the question is, do we really need it? We have an electrician that manages it and fixes it, the electrical company that works on it. Obviously, there's electricity involved, even though we don't use a lot of electricity, but we do have an electric bill. And if we removed it, would anybody even know the difference? So it becomes a question that the board's going to tackle to make a decision on what we're going to do with that, as compared to the monument sign lighting, but that's a different discussion. So,
given you mentioned the increase to cover some of the issues that you see coming and are in place already, increasing to 129 per home. Do you see that changing for 2023?
We look at it every July, and that's all we can ever say, is that we will look at it and we will go visit the HOAs and we'll tell them about our plans and collaborate. And I found it's never wise to predict how these things are going to turn out.
What's our relationship with the city of Henderson? Do we have ongoing discussions with them about the work? Have there been any issues with the city? How is that coming along?
It is sometimes a difficult relationship, frankly. The people are invariably friendly and fairly easy to talk to. But some of the city practices and procedures can be very frustrating for us. They have a habit of not involving us in conversations about the projects. We have one morning driving down SCA Drive, here's a piece of council-owned land, and there's a backhoe digging a hole. Who are you? Why are you digging a hole in my yard? You know, well, he has a city contract, and the city just didn't quite get around to telling us that somebody was going to dig up our land. So we have some issues with the city in terms of staying in touch with us about how their projects are, what projects they're planning, and you know what the schedule is going to be, and things like how the landscape's going to be restored. So we have our frustrations with the city, although I want to point out that we do consider all of the people there to be helpful and friendly, but some of their processes can be very frustrating.
Yeah, as a follow-up, I mean, we've met with them once. I don't know what previous boards ever met with the city of Henderson or not. I don't have any recollection. I know during my term, we've never met with them before until just about 4 or 5, 6 months ago. But I think the city is overwhelmed by, you know, so many properties, new properties, and if you don't engage by having that conversation, they're not going to engage with you. And I think that's exactly what we did. In other words, we forced a meeting. And they were happy to see us, which is great, but now we want to make sure that we continue that dialogue with them, because to Art's point, they're making decisions without any input, you know, from us on the parcels or the areas that we're responsible for. And it impacts a lot of things, impacts you know, all of our communities when that happens. You know, I mean, we have an issue, and then we have an issue at Sun City Anthem and Eastern. Because we see a lot of trucks with names, and we can write down the names. Why are they here? What are they doing? So we have trucks in there that are laying fiber optic right now, new fiber optic cable. We were never notified of this, not to say they had to notify us, but if it impacts our responsibility to our landscaping, then there is an impact. We don't want them to decide what they're going to put in that space. We have what we want in that space. So those become real issues, and we made aware of it. So we're taking an aggressive approach towards ensuring that we begin that dialogue and keep a dialogue going on with them.
You've discussed some of the issues with the city of Henderson as being something you need to address and are now addressing. Is that the major challenge that you have going forward, or are there others that you see?
I want to say it's a challenge, but I think we have to be responsible to say, let's not wait for them to reach out to us. We have to reach out to them. And we've got to continue that dialogue, not only for what we're aware of as of today, but what else is on the table that they might be thinking about and getting ready to place orders out to various construction companies or whatever to do whatever they need to do that will impact our community. I mean, I see a lot of people concerned about the orange cones we have right at the moment. I mean, they're everywhere. You know, not just with the sidewalk, with the fiber, you know, all kinds. And then sometimes we see a truck show up and we write down, we get the name of it. What are they doing here? We don't know why they're here. And we find out. So yes, that dialogue is really critical. You have a closing remark?
No, I guess my closing remark is just that over the years there seem to be many residents who consider the council to be some sort of mysterious foreign entity, you know, that takes their money and disappears and so forth. You know, we're an honest group of volunteers. Besides the board, we do have, Larry briefly alluded to the fact that we have a volunteer committee, mostly SCA residents who help advise about the landscaping and so forth. So we're an organization made up of the communities. with the mission of making this area look beautiful and maintaining the quality of life and the value of the properties in the area for the residents. And so we kind of appreciate people's having a positive attitude toward the council. We're hardworking volunteers trying to make their lives better. You're welcome.
I mean, to add to Art's point, and I appreciate your nice comments, and I hope people will see this and see that we aren't a mystery, but we see our mission as keeping Anthem desirable for new residents, for to come in and say, this is a place I want to live. Whether you're a senior citizen or not, we have everything available. Well, if we don't do our job, then we're not going to be desirable. And we take it seriously. And I think over the years, I've been a resident now for over 20 years for Sun City Anthem. And everything was great. But then when you get into the weeds, like we're now getting into, you say, well, we've got a lot of work to do. And we're taking that action, and hope the residents understand that there's nothing mysterious. We're doing it not just for the benefit of them, as it goes all the way up, to keep this a desirable, keep the home values up where they belong, keep the community values up there, and be a desirable place to live.
Well, Larry and Arthur, I just want to say thank you so much for such an informative conversation and for your time in coming here today and spending a good amount of time with us to discuss these matters. It is really appreciated by SCA-TV and by SCA. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
This is Steve Nanos for SCA-TV.